So we're delighted that so many of you are here this morning joining us for this conversation about the Black agenda. I'm going to say more about that in just a second, though. Let me first start with some housekeeping matters about how this conversation today is going to be conducted and how you can participate in that conversation now and even later into the dialogue. First of all, we are streaming right now on Ustream.tv. That's the letter Ustream.tv/Tavis Smiley. We're streaming live there now. I think you were asked earlier to text your family and friends or email your family and friends, let them know if they want to participate in this conversation. They can do so by going to Ustream.tv/Tavis and engage in a conversation with a number of bloggers who are there now. Lenny McAllister of Hip Hop Republicans, Kathleen Wells of the Huffington Post, Sean Walton Jr. of the Fresh Express, and others who are, again, participating in that dialogue at Ustream.tv/Tavis Smiley. That's one way to participate in that conversation. And for those of you who travel with your laptop like it's an accessory these days, who have it here in the building with you, of course, you can engage in your seats at Ustream.tv. We also want you to know at the end of this dialogue, we're going to spend a few hours here around this table engaged in some conversation. And in the last hour of this 4-hour conversation, there will be questions from the audience. We're going to give as many people as we can an opportunity to step to a microphone to my right and give you 30 seconds. And we'll talk more about that later, to ask whatever you want to ask or to make your statement. And we'll give you more details about that as we move to that part of the conversation. Today's conversation is really about, as I said earlier, an African-American agenda. Whether or not there ought to be one, how it is that we engage one and advance one, that is to say, an African-American agenda, in the era of Obama. How do we advance an African-American agenda in the era of Obama? And how do we do that in what many are calling a post-racial America? What about a black agenda in the era of Obama in a so-called post-racial America? I'm joined at this table by a number of distinguished Americans. I'll introduce them as we get to them in this conversation, but it's important for me to say at the top of this conversation that everything said around this table, and I hope when you get involved, everything said in this room will be rooted in love. That everything said at this table and everything, y'all didn't clap loud enough on that. Everything will be rooted in love. As a matter of fact, I want to make sure that love is so central to this dialogue. Well, as a matter of fact, hold on.
Okay.
We're going to keep love at the center of this conversation all day today. I don't need to say much more because it's not about me, it's about the conversation. I want to jump right into it. I want to start, though, with defining some terms, which I think is important. Because over the last couple of weeks, last few weeks, since making the announcement about this conversation here at Chicago State, about this black agenda, I've received mail from all kinds of Americans who think that the very notion, Dr. Dyson, the very notion of a black agenda is reductionist, it's pejorative, it's exclusionary, it's racist, it's divisive. So we have to start, it seems to me, with defining the terms here. So let me come to you first. When we talk about a black agenda, what do we mean by that?
Well, I want to thank you, first of all, Tavis, for convening us here today in only a style that you are capable of doing, and we celebrate your genius and your bravery. When I think about the black agenda, I think about the history of this country. That is to say that at its origins, a notion of universal democracy was put forth as the predicate for constituting a new nation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and it meant men, are created equal. in that universal conception, all men, given a patriarchal society and the way in which all was signified by male, there were many people excluded. Women were excluded, slaves were excluded, people of color were excluded, First Nation people were excluded, of course slaves were excluded. So as the nation began to take shape and articulate its own self-understanding, what it felt democracy to be, what it felt justice to be, what it felt was the righteous path to take, people of color who were African slaves were systematically excluded from the larger circle of American privilege. So how do you reconcile, on the one hand, the expression of a document that celebrates the universal freedom of human beings and exclude folk on the other hand? Black leadership steps into the gap to try to articulate the grievances of exclusion of African American people from that larger circle of American privilege. And they began to defend the gains that are necessary to close the gap between the ideal and the reality. So from the very beginning, black leadership is about reinterpreting the fundamental premises of American democracy so that the ideals after which they aim can be embodied and the noble goals that they articulate can be lived up to. It is not, as you said, a pejorative and exclusionary practice to talk about a black agenda. The black agenda responds to the already excluded principles by which black people have been kept out. Now, the question is, in this particular era, as we evolve, we think about the fact that during slavery, we had black leaders who expressed our grievances and talked about our gains and talked about our group identity. We did that during Reconstruction. We did that during Jim Crow law and legal segregation. We did that during the height of the Civil Rights Movement. We did that during the 70s when there was a white backlash. And we must do that now in this so-called post-racial era. A black agenda is nothing more than the possibility of African American people being included in American democratic experimentation without hindrance or limitation or encumbrances, number one. Number two, what's very important to say, we are not un-American, we are ultimate Americans. We express our ultimate patriotism by being able to love the country. It was James Baldwin who said, "I love this country more than any nation on the earth, which is why I reserve the right to criticize her perpetually." So my point is, a black agenda is about making America live up to its best and noble ideas and to express the ways in which African American people have been excluded and how we must now be included in that. And then finally, often we have been rejected into America. We have been seen as the litmus test for what is authentically American only after we have defined what is not American. A lot of people did not see Martin Luther King Jr. as a hero. A lot of people did not see W.E.B. Du Bois as a hero. A lot of people didn't even see Nannie Helen Burroughs as a hero, or Fannie Lou Hamer, or Ella Baker. These are people who had the temerity, the unabashed gall to stand up against America and say, "No, you ain't doing it right. What you call America is not America. What we think is America is what you said." Dr. King said the night before he died, "Be true to what you said on paper." Black leadership expresses a black agenda that wants America to become better and more noble in its aspirations, but at the same time pay attention to those who have been excluded. So when I think black agenda, I think of, even in the age of Obama, Mr. Obama is an extraordinary human being who is a great president, potentially. We love him. We think he's a marvelous human being. But at the same time, a black agenda is not qualified or surrendered because Mr. Obama is in the White House. Mr. Obama is the chief executive of the United States of America. He has a right to exercise his vision about what should happen. We as black leaders, black intellectuals, black critics, black public servants are here to defend a black agenda that may ironically be even more viciously assaulted when we have a black face on an American empire that has been historically insensitive to the cause and claims of black people. So when I see black agenda, I say, let's articulate what we need at this particular point in this post-racial era. And I'll end by saying this. I don't believe in a post-racial moment. I think we should have a post-racist moment. We should not look beyond the reality of race. We should look beyond the reality of racism. Black agendas are about America. When America is made best, black people stand up and articulate our visions, our dreams, our aspirations, our sentiments. We love Mr. Obama. We recognize he is a president. We must have prophets who tell the truth, and that's what we're doing here today.
As you all know, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, professor at Georgetown, prolific author.